Hello Earthlings! So today I'm finally filming my Giver Quartet review. I've been putting this off for way too long and I don't even know why, because I loved the series. For this video I'm going to start with a spoiler-free review of the entire series, and then I'm going to go into The Giver, then Gathering Blue and Messenger and Sun, so that you can watch as far as you've read. I'm going to tell you when I'm going to go into the next book so that you can stop the video there. So now that I've established that, let's start with the spoiler-free general overview of the series. In general, I have to say I loved this series. What I absolutely adored about the series is that it kind of falls in line with George Orwell, Ray Bradbury, Aldous Huxley, and all this classic dystopian literature, and it is very concise and it's short and it's easy to read. And it's just a brilliant piece of literature. I have to admit that it leaves you very confused at times, and that if you don't stick to all of the books, you don't get the full story. So you have to read the entire thing to get something from that series, because to me that first book is just not enough. The worst thing about the series is that because it is so short and so concise, it is very easy to spoil yourself. Even reading the text on the back of the books is gonna give away things, especially with The Giver, because that basically gives away the whole point of the book. If you've not yet watched the trailer for The Giver, don't, because that is going to spoil stuff in the book as well. Because the stories are so dense, it's hard to summarize even the slightest bit. All I can tell you is that it is definitely dystopian, and that I loved it to bits, so you just have to trust me on this. The style of these books is definitely something you have to get used to, so basically you either love it or you hate it. If you don't read it to the end, you haven't experienced the whole thing. You cannot judge this series by just a part of these books, believe me. Now I'm gonna go into a more detailed discussion of The Giver itself, so if you haven't read The Giver yet, leave. Please, I don't want to spoil anything for you. I watched the movie trailer before I read the book, so I already knew that the world Jonas is living in is just black and white, and that he will start seeing colors after a while. So I was not as confused as I think I would have been if I hadn't seen the trailer. Because we see everything through Jonas' eyes, we only experience what he experiences, and because he knows nothing else, he just knows this black and white world, he can't tell the difference. We never get to know that it's black and white until he understands that he's starting to see colors, until he's talking to the Giver. So that's something that I kind of think could be hard to understand if you're reading the book without having seen the trailer beforehand or knowing about this book in any way. For me, this book read really fast. In part that was because I was super curious what this world was gonna be like, so I just read super fast to get as much information in as I could. What also definitely helped me were the short chapters. When I finished a chapter, I didn't have a huge chapter ahead of me, so I felt more motivated to read another chapter and another chapter and another chapter, which in the end finishes the book. Even though I already knew a lot about the book because I had seen the trailer for the movie and I'd already read the text on the back, which admittedly I shouldn't have done, I basically knew a lot about the story, but I was still confused all the way through because I could picture the world, but I was still putting things together, and it kind of didn't give as much as I would have liked about the world outside of the community, which of course is logical because Jonas doesn't know anything about the communities outside, etc. But I kind of would have liked more about how the world got there and what this is about, etc. The whole setting in the community kind of seemed clinical and cold and reminded me a lot of Abnegation, and I can't say I really like it, especially the lack of human relationships and human love is very scary, I have to say. I really thought this was a very scary idea of the future. Even though I thought the society was really scary, I think it was also interesting. and the book did a really good job at building the story world. However, what I didn't really like was, on the one hand, that it had a lot of description-ish kind of things, a lot of Jonah's thoughts and feelings, and a lot of him thinking about his language and what words to use, rather than real action. I waited for, I think, 3/4 of the book for the plot twist with his assignment to happen, and because I knew it would happen, I was really unnerved that it took so long for it to happen. And then the time with the Giver was way too short for my taste. I would have liked to see more of that. And also the ending was so abrupt that I was so frustrated with this book. And I read it over and over again, and I realized that this ending is as abrupt as it is. And I have to say I hated that. I was considering putting the series down because I didn't like the ending, and I didn't have any confirmation that Jonas would come up again in any of the other books. So I was really annoyed at that ending. So that was what I thought of The Giver, and I'm now going to move on to Gathering Blue, the second book in the series. When I read the text on the back of Gathering Blue, and I have to admit that that's something you shouldn't be doing, I was really confused who Kira was, and I didn't know how this would connect to anything I'd read before. And as I previously said, the ending of The Giver really annoyed me, so the fact that Jonas was not to appear in this book just annoyed me more. But I decided to read the book because it's really short, and I did. And I liked it. I liked it a lot. All throughout the book, I was looking for connections to The Giver, and when Matt mentioned a boy in Kira's age in the village, I was like, that's Jonas! That's Jonas! That's Jonas! That has to be Jonas! And I was so happy, and I started shipping Kira and Jonas immediately. I loved that Kira's village had such a strong contrast to Jonas' village. And it's much more brutal and rural, and it does not have any technology. And it's as if they were from different times. I have to say that Kira is probably my favorite character from the entire series. I just love how optimistic she is and how much of a fighter she is. She's really a strong female character. I would have preferred it if she had left the village at the end and gone with Matty and her father, but you know, that's how the story went, so I have to accept that, and I can't do anything against it. I just can disagree, and I do disagree. So now let's move on to Messenger. Village seems the most hopeful society of them all, and we now know that all of these villages are actually quite close to each other and that they coexist at the same time, and I have no clue how that is possible, but it is possible. It's just kind of weird to see how different communities developed autonomously. What also really surprised me was that we now got introduced to the element of magic in this series. And while we already knew that Kira kind of had magical powers with her weaving, we get that confirmed by Leader, aka Jonas, and Matty, who has powers, and also the Trade Master, who's extremely creepy, and the Trade Mart, etc, etc. This book is definitely much darker than the others because it has this extremely gloomy and creepy first, and the creepy Trade Mart with the even creepier Trade Master. Apart from that, we also have a death. We lose our protagonist. Didn't really have a connection to Matty until the point where he died. And I was just so annoyed. In this book, we also finally learn more about Jonas and what happened after The Giver. And at this point, I was very much content, and I knew where the book was going and where the series was going, and I knew that we were going to have all the connections and that we were going to have all the wrap-ups that we could wish for, and that made me very happy, and I was just getting eager to read the rest. I think my favorite part of this book are definitely the abilities. The way that they are described and set up, and the way they discover them, and the way they're explained is just so nice. With this book, I definitely didn't have a problem with getting into the story as much as I had with The Giver or Gathering Blue, because I already knew Matty, I already had feel for his character. It was just easier to read, I guess. I really liked Messenger. Let's move on to book 4, Sun. As easy as it was to get into Messenger, it was really hard to get into Sun because, again, we were at a different place from the book before, and we had a completely new character, and I didn't have a clue where I was going because at that point I had stopped reading the text on the back. Obviously, we were in Jonah's community, and it didn't take me long to place the timeline where we were at, and it kind of starts earlier than The Giver and ends way later than Messenger. It's basically the story of what Claire was doing while everyone else was doing some other stuff. Of course, the fact that we are in Jonah's community gives us a throwback to The Giver, and especially the fact that Claire gets in contact with Jonah's father and even spies Jonas at some point definitely helps to connect the text. But the part where she's in the shore village kind of threw me off because, you know, it was another place and it was another setting and another different society. Even though this society was very close to Kira's society, it was not as brutal or cruel in any way. This book definitely connected very well to the other 3 books, and it also made me see the world that this entire series was set in much clearer. I loved all the throwbacks to the previous books and that just made this book so well-rounded. I really like the idea of Kira and Jonas together, but I absolutely love the relationship that Kira and Einar had, and I was really sad that she actually left, but I also knew that behind that there would be Gabe, and that she would find her son, and that was everything she wanted. I really liked Claire's time in the village at the shore because I really liked the characters, I really liked the setting, and I loved the training aspect of Einar telling her how to climb that wall, and I thought that was so great, and I was also very, very positive that she would make it. Again, we have Trademaster in this, and I have to say I hated him even more because he took her youth away, because that made it even more impossible for her to speak to Gabriel and to make him understand that she's his mother and stuff. The timelines between the end of the 2nd part and the beginning of the 3rd part kind of threw me off again, even though I caught up quickly because now we had Gabriel's perspective, and I love Gabriel, and it was so cute. Gabriel's such a cutie. What I really liked about Gabriel's perspective were the throwbacks to Matty at times, and the fact that he grew up in village and wasn't tainted by any other cruel society in any way. I was so scared that Claire would never kind of open up to tell anyone that she's Gabriel's mother, and I was so happy when she finally told Jonas and Kira, and I was really happy at their reaction and that Jonas made it possible that Gabriel understood that this woman was his mother. At the end, I was extremely scared that Claire would die before Gabriel had the chance to kill Trademaster, and I was also extremely scared that Gabriel would fail to kill Trademaster, but I'm really relieved and happy at the happy ending that we got, even though it was really, really quick and short. The final battle between Gabriel and the Trademaster was amazing. I loved the fact that he overcame Trademaster with his abilities and his wit rather than strength and weapon, because I prefer these kinds of solutions. I mean, everyone can go around stabbing people to death, but being witty enough to outsmart them, that is something that needs talent. And that made the reason that Gabriel was the one who had to kill him so much more logical. So I thought it was a really, really smart solution to not have that boy kill him in the traditional way with a sword or any other weapon. Back to my general opinion on the series, I have to say that my favorite book was definitely Sun, followed by Messenger and Going Blue, and then The Giver. And I really have to say that it is a rising action, and that's basically why I say that you have to read all of the books rather than just read that one book. I'm sorry for hitting the camera right there. Also, I kind of had the feeling that what The Giver lacked in speed, Sun picked up at the end, because that was such an abrupt and rushed ending. I mean, it kind of tied up everything, but it still felt rushed and very sudden. A question that I have after finishing the series is where the training people who come to Jonah's village and take Claire with them come from, because they're not from either of the villages that we have come to know. So there has to be something else out there, and I think it's really sad that we don't get to see that. But, you know, I suppose she couldn't write about everything. In general, I have to say I absolutely love the series. I love all the connections that you can find between the books, and I love the characters and how the world was built, etc, etc. I love the writing style and the way she tells the story. So overall, I absolutely adored that series. I also like that it is something different because it seems straightforward dystopian in the beginning, but then we get this element of the abilities and magic, and that kind of takes it to a whole new level, and it makes it something that you wouldn't be expecting when you just started reading The Giver. So I definitely love how it surprises you over and over again, and I will be rereading that series very soon. So that was all I have to say about this series. If there is anything left that you would like to add, please leave that down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please leave me a like and subscribe if you want to see more of my ramblings. I have no idea when I will be putting up my next video. I have no time at all at the moment. By the latest, it will be May, I promise, but it might take a while. So be aware of that. Bye bye!